Who's firing? God damn it! Yeah! I ordered to hold fire.
Ray Lovejoy is our editor, and it was a tremendous responsibility. And you've got to remember, this is before you have all of the, Avid and Lightworks and, any kind of digital editing.
So we got half as much as I wanted and twice as much as we need, like most days. Well, maybe Ray would argue with that. We're looking at some material that I shot in a previous life 3 weeks ago. I dimly remember doing. It's part of the airlock sequence, the finale of the film, with Sigourney Weaver dangling for her life, basically.
There was a lot of film shot, and of course at the time we were editing on film, which simply meant that there was so much film to go through that Ray was really forced to work at a speed much faster than I think he'd ever worked at before. But luckily, he was on the same page with Jim, and his first cuts were very close to what Jim was hoping to see in his director's cut. So essentially, the rough cut and the editor's version was a very good roadmap for Jim's final fine cut. But nonetheless, the hours extended into 16, 18-hour days, 7 days a week. And, at a certain point, I think everyone was so exhausted, but we were constantly under pressure to make sure that we didn't compromise anything that would have in any way harmed the final film.
I got to England to write the score because I was going to write it where Jim was. He was in England doing post. And I found that instead of the film being totally locked and finished, they were still shooting. And it was coming out of my time to write the score allotment. I had 6 weeks to write the score when I got there, thinking that was sufficient, but there was no picture to score when I got there. They were still shooting, much less editing. I sat around for 3 weeks, visited the sets, visited the editing room. They had 16 rooms at Pinewood with bins of film and trims. It was a nightmare. Ray was inundated in his own. He was just barely keeping up with the shots and getting the film cut. And Jim Cameron is as hands-on with editors as he is with composers and cameramen. I think there was a lot of stress there, too. Again, because of time. Things just took so long in England.
Cut. Let's try it again.
He was so behind, he was so preoccupied with sound effects. I mean, I remember him spending 2 days at a guy's perfecting the sound of the automatic weapons. He was so preoccupied with every facet of the production. And to add insult to injury, at Abbey Road Studios, where I recorded it, the facilities were 30 years old. They were barely able to patch in synthesizers, much less be able to do some of the things I'd wanted to do electronically. I mean, they were so behind the times. The mixer, who was brilliant in Star Wars, was out of his league with this kind of a movie, which needed all kinds of modern recording techniques. It's all fixable. It's just, can we move the picture back and give us another 4 weeks? No. So the picture was stayed. Release dates are imminent. We're 6 weeks away from theater release, and we haven't started scoring or dubbing yet. And I haven't even started writing. I haven't even started seeing the movie.
He ran out of time, and he actually hadn't finished all of the cues for our film when we were sitting there with the London Symphony Orchestra. And we realized that, I think the cue was 12M12, but it was the final cue of the film. We were going through all of the cues, and we realized it hadn't been written. And of course, I think anyone would be a little stressed to find out that the climactic cue of the film didn't exist yet.
But that, was the last thing to come to me. And literally, I had 4 days. Now, I had seen it in the editing room, and I knew what the concept was. That's no problem. The concept was fine. The problem was, in my line of work, writing a melody in its simplest terms takes 2 seconds. The hard part is weaving a carpet that lasts exactly a certain amount of time, and in that time, I have to acknowledge maybe 36, 38 events. Gunfire, people dying, a monster dying, whatever the things are. It relies on exact timings to the 100th of a second so that the music matches the picture. Now, when you look at it and it's all still a mess and it's not locked and it's not edited, the musical ideas are there, but I can't write, physically can't write anything. And that's something Gail didn't understand because they didn't have very much music production experience. They didn't know what they were asking, that how inhuman and how difficult it was. I ended up writing the cue as best I could, and then 2 days before, or a day before, I was supposed to record the music. Massive changes. They'd changed the whole sequence around. And I was up for, 36 hours, making sense, retiming, rewriting like crazy, and then recording it. And then Jim says, well, can't we do this there? And can't we do this there? And Gail said, I thought we were going to have an acknowledgement there. And I said, well, you did yesterday, but now the sequence is changed. And that's how it just goes. And it was all a question of the pressure of time. I said, Jim, we're down to 5 or 6 days. I have to start writing, and I can't change anything once it's written. It's got to go straight to the copyists because it's going to never make it to the stands. My job right now is to make sure the musicians have something to play at least that sounds 80% of what you're asking for. If I had more time, I could make it 100%, but we don't. And Gail's response was icy cold. She said, well, we'll just get somebody who can. And I said, please do. If you can get somebody more experienced and better able to produce this than me, I'd like to meet him because I'm sure I'll learn something. Well, inevitably, that goes away. It's all just war talk in the trenches. But that was the attitude.
But the incredible thing is that he wrote it essentially overnight. And it became the signature cue, not only in our film, but it's been used in trailer after trailer after trailer. I think it's one of the most used cues for any kind of action trailer to this day.
I'm glad it all works. You always remember a little bit what it took to get there, and it's difficult, but it's water under the bridge. I think that both of us felt after Aliens that life was too short for the films he wanted to make on the schedules he wanted to work under. And the way I worked, I needed more time. He wanted a lot of control and didn't have a lot of time on the way he was working. And I think we both felt life was too short to have these conflicts. And I only wanted the best score for him. And we sort of parted after that. It was very difficult, just again, because of the time and because we're both perfectionists. Well, years have gone by now since I last worked with Jim. I heard about this project, Titanic. I love the story, and I had done Braveheart by this point, and it was something that I felt I could tell this particular story very well. I thought this was me. I could do this. I mean, it was perfect. It wasn't the Terminator things, or it was a real story that I could tell and be sensitive, not just all action. It so happens that Jim had also been thinking about me. He loved Braveheart, loved the score, and he said it was his favorite score, and he had been playing it a lot. And we both sort of approached each other to have a meeting over Titanic. And I begged him to do it, basically. And he said, okay, you got it. We met for like 3 hours in his office. It was a great, great meeting. It was just like 5 minutes of getting rid of history and the rest all just sort of talking about this movie, which we were both in love with. It makes me feel so crazy when I can't give perfection because of some stupid superimposed schedule that has nothing to do with the filmmakers. It has only to do with marketing department. And it's so difficult sometimes. And you have to be very clever to work around that.
Not bad for it.
Aliens was very early on in my career. Titanic wasn't. And you mellow with age. I think Jim's mellowed, and I've certainly mellowed. And that all helps the process.
Shoot it out!
Aliens was a tight schedule, and in order to meet that schedule, with any of the delays that came across because of picture changes or waiting for special effects shots, and the fact that the music did need a certain amount of manipulation, we in fact ran a night shift here, and a colleague, mixer Otto Snell, pre-mixed all the music at night so that we could have a fair chance at it in the daytime. Composers, like everybody else who has an input to the film, really want to support their side there, and music is a very important part of the soundtrack, but it's not the most important part of the soundtrack. And there's as much tension or dramatic effect can be gained from the music stopping as the music starting. And if the music continues all the way through, you lose those stops and starts.
Music can create a sense of dread, obviously, we all know that, and that has to be put in certain subtle ways so that you don't feel like you're being told to be afraid. Because you can't be told to be afraid, you can't be ordered to be afraid. You can only have that feeling that you're already having slightly heightened by the musical experience. I think what's more important is the sound effects, the sense that you can hear every little sound. So the mix can be made to simulate that state of hyper-awareness that you get when your adrenal glands kick in, when you're on alert, when you're in a dark room, when you're in a strange place. Your senses all are functioning at 110% or 150% of their normal level. So all the little tiny minute sounds become louder. And so I think you kind of simulate that with the mix of the movie, and you're simulating a physiological experience that people recognize from their own lives.
Hold up!
We discussed at great length the necessity to maintain light and shade in a soundtrack. It's all too easy to smother a soundtrack in continuous loud level. And we were very concerned that we should manipulate it so that it went through a series of like sawtooths where there were actual quiet patches before we hit each loud sound.
Help! What?
Tom, get over here! We got a live one! Where are you? Can you hear me?
When they were chasing, looking for Newt, the small 4 or 5 frames where they find her under the grill and her fingers come through.
Newt, are you okay?
We're down to a very, very low level of sound that gives us the chance to take off again at high level, and for that to then be impressive because of the quiet patch. I remember one occasion when we were waiting for a special effects shot, which I think was the drop ship flying into the planet, and it was just on the screen as a scene missing, and we were at the point where we should be premixing this, and Jim said, "Oh, I know where it goes. and he picked up a broom and he ran down to the screen and he said, held the broom up in the air, follow this. And we panned the sound effects for the dropship across the screen and around as he was running in front of the screen with the broom. And of course, it was perfect. At the time, there were many people knocking Jim Cameron for seeking perfection and giving everybody a hard time. But time has proved he was right. He's gone on to produce a string of box office successes based on the same principle.